100 hours in a single player game and you still won't be done. Sounds crazy, right? Well, I'm gonna talk about 10 single player RPGs that'll eat your life and leave you begging for more. If you think you can handle the grind, like I did, keep watching. This is not for the weak. Kingdom Come Deliverance is basically a medieval life simulator that is gonna make you feel like a total loser for the first 10 hours of your life. Kingdom Come Deliverance is the kind of game that basically hates you for the first 20 hours, and it does not even try to hide it. You play as a guy named Henry, and I am telling you right now that Henry is probably the most useless person I have ever seen in a video game. Most games give you a sword and tell you that you are the chosen one, but this game just gives you a bag of charcoal and watches you get beat up by the local drunk guy. It is honestly hilarious how bad you are at everything, because you cannot even swing a sword without falling over or getting out of breath like you just ran a marathon in heavy boots. You'll probably spend the first few days just trying to figure out how to not starve to death or get killed by a random guy on the side of the road with a stick. The realism in this game is actually kind of insane, and it's definitely why people end up playing it for over 100 hours. You have to literally learn every single thing from scratch, just like you would in real life. If you want to use a bow, you are gonna suck at it, and the arrow will just fly into the dirt while your arm shakes like crazy. You even have to learn how to read, because Henry is just a regular peasant who never went to school, so when you open a book, all the letters are just scrambled up like a bowl of alphabet soup. You have to find a guy to teach you and sit there for days just so you can understand what a sign says. It is a total grind, but it feels so good when you finally win a fight because you actually had to practice and get better at the game instead of the game just making you a god for no reason. I also think it is funny that the game cares so much about how you look and smell. If you walk into a castle covered in mud and pig poop, the lords will literally tell you to go away because you smell like trash. You have to actually find a bathhouse and pay money to get clean just so people will treat you like a human being. The combat is super slow, and it feels like you are actually trying to move a heavy piece of metal around, and if you fight more than one person, you might as well just give up and load your last save. It is a long journey, and most of it is just you walking through the woods and trying to not get jumped by bandits, but the story is so good that you just keep going anyway. You start off as a guy who can't even hold a hammer right, and by the end, you're wearing full plate armor and looking like a total beast, which is the only reason I stayed hooked for so long. It is a massive time sink, and it will definitely make you frustrated, but there is nothing else like it out there. The Witcher 3 is basically the king of all RPGs, and it is the main reason why so many people have zero social lives anymore. You play as this guy named Geralt who has white hair and 2 swords, and he looks like he really needs a nap and a glass of water. His whole job is just walking around and killing monsters for money, because apparently regular people in this world are too scared to handle a single big bird or a werewolf. The main story is all about finding his daughter Ciri because she is being chased by these spooky ghost knights called the Wild Hunt, but honestly, the game gives you so many distractions that you will probably forget she even exists for like 50 hours. The coolest part about this game is that the side quests do not feel like boring chores. In most games, a guy asks you to find his lost cow and you just do it and get some gold. But in this game, that cow probably got eaten by a demon, or the guy's neighbor is actually a secret vampire. You get pulled into these super deep stories where you have to use your Witcher senses to track down blood trails and smells like some kind of medieval Sherlock Holmes. You'll be riding your horse roach through the woods and see a random yellow exclamation point, and suddenly you are caught in a 3-hour adventure about a cursed baby or a haunted lighthouse. It's actually kind of a problem because you want to save the world, but you keep getting stopped by every random villager who has a weird problem.
Ah, the Witcher. Should have expected as much.
Then there's the card game called Gwent, which is basically a drug for gamers. There is literally a world-ending threat happening and people are dying left and right, but Geralt will still stop everything just to play a round of cards with a random shopkeeper. You spend so much time traveling across the entire map just to find rare cards because you want to have the best deck in the world. Between the card games and the monster hunting and the crazy amount of talking you have to do, you can easily spend 100 hours and still feel like you haven't even seen half of the map. The game game also forces you to make these really hard choices where there is no right answer. Sometimes you think you're being a good guy and helping someone out, but then you come back 10 hours later and find out that your choice caused an entire village to burn down or something crazy like that. It's super depressing, but it makes you feel like your choices actually matter, which is why people keep playing it over and over again. The world is just massive, and every single corner of it has something interesting to look at or something scary that wants to eat your face. If you start this game, you might as well say goodbye to your friends and family because you're gonna be busy being a grumpy monster hunter for a very long time.
See how I've wheeled her in? Now don't fuck this up.
Skyrim is basically that one game that Bethesda keeps selling to us every single year, and for some reason, we all just keep buying it because we have no self-control. It starts out with you in the back of a wagon and some guy tells you that you are finally awake, and honestly, that is the last time you will ever have peace in your life. You find out pretty fast that you are the Dragonborn, which basically means you can eat dragon souls and scream at people until they fly off the side of a mountain. It sounds really cool and powerful, but mostly you just end up running around the woods looking for butterflies and weird glowing mushrooms while a giant dragon is literally trying to end the entire world in the background. The reason you spend over 100 hours in this game is because it is actually impossible to stay on the main path for more than 5 minutes. You'll be walking to a city to talk to a king about something super important, and then you see a random cave or a weird tower, and suddenly it is 3 in the morning and you are the leader of a secret club of assassins. You can join a magic school even if you do not know a single spell, or you can become a werewolf and just run around eating people in the middle of the night. You can literally do anything you want, like becoming a master thief, or just a guy who steals every single sweet roll in the entire province just to be a jerk. Everyone always says they are going to play as a brave warrior with a shield or a powerful mage, but we all know that you are just going to end up as a stealth archer again. It's like a law of nature where you just crouch in a dark corner and shoot people in the head while they walk around saying it was probably just the wind, even though their friend is lying dead right next to them. The AI is actually kinda stupid, and the game is famous for being super buggy, but that is what makes it so funny. You will definitely see a horse walking vertically up a mountain or a giant hitting you so hard that you fly into the actual moon, and you just have to laugh because it's part of the experience. There are so many mods for this game that you can turn the dragons into giant flying trains or make the graphics look like a real movie if your computer doesn't explode first. You can play this game for 10 years and still find a random chest hidden under a bridge or a secret quest in a tavern that you never saw before. It is the ultimate game for wasting 100 hours of your life because there is always one more mountain to climb or one more dungeon to clear out. It's a total mess sometimes, but it has so much charm that you just keep coming back for more, even though you have already saved the world like 50 times. Persona 5 Royal is basically what happens when you take a regular high school student and give him a bunch of weird ghost powers and a talking cat who thinks he's a human. This game is so long that you could probably finish middle school in the time it takes to see the credits roll, because it easily goes over 100 hours for just one playthrough. You play as a guy who got in trouble for a crime he did not even do, and now he has to move to Tokyo and live in a dusty attic above a coffee shop while everyone at school thinks he's a total delinquent. The game is split into 2 parts, which is why it takes forever, because half the time you're just a normal kid going to class, and the other half you're a superhero thief jumping into people's brains to steal their evil thoughts. The style of this game is honestly just cool, and it makes every other game look kind of boring and gray. Everything is bright red and black, and the music is so catchy that you'll be humming it in your sleep while you dream about fighting shadows. You spend a ton of time just hanging out with your friends and eating giant burgers, or going to the movies just to make your stats go up so you can be more popular or smarter. It sounds like it would be boring to go to school in a video game, but for some reason it is super addicting, and you start caring about these anime characters like they're your real-life best friends.
Nice!
Beautiful.
Then there's Morgana, who is a small black cat that follows you everywhere, and he is probably the most annoying part of the whole experience. He constantly tells you that you are tired and forces you to go to sleep, even when you just want to go out and do something fun, and it is honestly a total buzzkill. But you need to stay on his good side because he turns into a literal van in the underground subway dungeons, which is just as weird as it sounds. The royal version of the game adds an entire extra semester at the end with a new story and a new character named named Kasumi, and that extra content alone is like another 30 hours of gameplay. The combat is turn-based, which some people think is old school and slow, but this game makes it feel fast and punchy like a movie. You collect these things called personas, which are basically like edgy Pokemon that you use to blast enemies with fire and ice and physical attacks. You can even fuse them together to make stronger ones, and you'll spend hours just sitting in a velvet jail cell trying to create the perfect monster for your team. The story gets really deep and deals with some pretty dark stuff about adults being terrible people, and it feels really good to finally take them down and make them apologize for being jerks. It's a massive commitment, and your eyes will probably hurt from all the reading and flashy lights, but it is one of the best stories ever told in a game.
Going all in on this plan is the only choice we got. I wonder who they'll bring justice to next. It's not just Japan anymore. The whole world's waiting to see the Phantom Thieves' next move.
Divinity Original Sin 2 is basically the game where everything is constantly on fire and it is usually your fault. You start the game on a boat with a physical collar around your neck because you are a sorcerer, which is just a fancy way of saying you have magic that the government thinks is illegal and dangerous. Everyone treats you like a freaking criminal, and you have to find a way to escape this island called Fort Joy, which is honestly a terrible name because there is zero joy to be found there at all. You will probably spend the first 30 hours of your life just trying to get off that one tiny island, and by the time you finally leave, you realize you have barely even started the actual story. The combat in this game is turn-based, but it is way more complicated than something like Pokemon because the ground you are standing on actually matters. If you cast a rain spell and then hit someone with lightning, they will get stunned. But if you throw a fireball at a puddle of oil, everything just explodes into a giant mess of flames. It is hilarious and frustrating because half the time you end up accidentally killing your own team because you did not see a random barrel of poison hiding behind a wall. You have to think like 5 steps ahead, or the enemies will just wipe you out and you will be staring at a game over screen for the 10th time in an hour while you wonder why you even play video games. One of the coolest things is that you can pick these special characters with their own crazy backstories, and they are all kind of messed up in the head. You can play as a skeleton named Fane, who has to wear a human face as a mask just so people do not scream and run away from him, or you can be a girl with a literal demon living inside her brain that talks to her during quests. The dialogue is actually super funny, and you can even get a skill to talk to animals, which is probably the best part of the whole game. Dogs and rats actually have some of the most dramatic stories to tell you, and sometimes they give you better advice than the actual human characters do. You'll easily spend over 100 hours just reading books and talking to random ghosts because the world is so packed with weird stuff that you do not want to miss a single secret. It's definitely a hard game, and it does not hold your hand at all, but that's why it feels so good when you finally become a god and show everyone why they should not have messed with you in the first place. You can even play the whole thing with your friends and spend the entire time arguing over who gets the best armor or who accidentally blew up the healer with a stray fire spell. It's a massive time sink, but it's worth every second because of how much freedom you have to be a hero or just a total jerk to everyone you meet.
Can be divided.
Fallout New Vegas is basically the greatest mistake ever made because it is a buggy mess that crashes all the time, but it is also a masterpiece that will ruin your life for 3 months straight. You start the game by getting shot in the actual face by a guy in a checkered suit who sounds like he belongs in a jazz club, and then a robot digs you out of a shallow grave like it is no big deal. Most people would just stay in bed after getting their head opened up, but you decide to walk across a radioactive desert just to find the guy who tried to kill you so you can probably kill him back, or at least get your delivery package back. The whole game is set in the Mojave Wasteland, which is mostly just dirt and angry giant bugs, but for some reason you just cannot stop exploring every single broken building and abandoned gas station you find. The reason you spend over 100 hours in this desert is because every single person you meet has a massive problem and they all want you to fix it with a gun or by talking. You have to pick a side between a bunch of guys who think they are the old government and a bunch of weirdos called the Legion who dress like Romans skins and wear football pads for armor. It is honestly hilarious because these guys in skirts think they're gonna take over the world with machetes and throwing spears, while everyone else has lasers and mini nukes. Then there's Mr. House, who is just a giant grumpy face on a computer screen, and he thinks he owns everything because he has an army of robots with wheels for legs. You spend so much time talking to these different groups and deciding who to betray that you end up playing the game 5 times just to see what happens if you blow up a dam or let a bunch of ghouls fly into space in a rickety rocket ship. There is so much weird stuff hidden in this game that you will be finding new things even after you've been playing for 100 hours. You can stumble into a town that is literally full of cannibals who dress like they are going to a fancy prom. The game even lets you kill basically anyone you want, so if you get annoyed by a guy talking too much, you can just end his career right there and the game will just keep going and change the story to fit your choices. It is famous for being broken, and you will definitely see a lizard flying through the sky for no reason, but the writing is so good that you just do not care. It's the kind of game where you go in for a quick quest and come out 10 hours later wondering why the sun is coming up and why you are still wearing a cowboy hat and carrying a big iron on your hip. Elden Ring is basically a giant prank played on gamers by a guy named Miyazaki and the dude who wrote Game of Thrones. You start the game by getting roasted by some random guy who tells you that you are maidenless, which is basically a fancy way of saying you have no friends and nobody likes you. Then you walk out into this massive world called the Lands Between. Good. You will be riding your weird ghost horse named Torrent and see a cool castle in the distance, but then you fall down a hole and end up in an underground city that is literally the size of a whole different game. There are no map markers telling you where to go, so you just wander around like a lost tourist until you accidentally walk into a room with a boss that is 40 feet tall and has way too many arms. You will die about 1,000 times and you will probably scream at your TV, but for some reason you just keep coming back because you want to see what is over the next hill. And, well, why you will lose your entire life to this game? Well, first, the bosses are bullies. You will spend 3 hours trying to beat one boss named Melania, and she will just heal herself every time she hits you, which is the most unfair thing I have ever seen in a video game. Second, the story is a mystery. You have to literally read the description of a random piece of poop or a broken sword just to figure out why the world is falling apart because the game refuses to just tell you what is happening. Next, I wanted to say that yeah, fashion is everything too. You will spend way too much time making your character look cool even if it means you have 0 armor and get killed by a single poke from a skeleton. Also, the one more try trap. You tell yourself you are going to bed, but then you find a new cave and suddenly the sun is coming up and you've got boring work to do. It is honestly kind of a toxic relationship because the game treats you like trash and you just keep saying thank you and asking for more. You can play as a big guy with a hammer or a wizard who shoots blue lasers out of his head, but either way, you are gonna get wrecked at least once a minute. The only reason it takes 100 hours is because you spent half that time looking at a screen that says you died in giant red letters. But when you finally beat a boss that has been bullying you for 3 days, it feels better than winning the lottery, and that is why everyone is obsessed with it. It's a masterpiece of pain, and if you start playing it, you can pretty much forget about seeing the sun for a month. Dragon Age Inquisition is basically what happens when you are just minding your own business at a party and suddenly the sky explodes and everyone decides it's your job to fix it. You start the game with a glowing green hole in your hand that can close giant rifts in the air, and because of that, everyone starts calling you the Inquisitor and acting like you are some kind of holy celebrity. It is honestly a lot of pressure because one minute you are a nobody and the next minute you're running a literal army and sitting on a giant throne deciding if people should be kicked out of the kingdom or thrown in jail. The reason this game takes over 100 hours is because it is absolutely filled with stuff that distracts you from actually saving the world. You go to a place called the Hinterlands and you think you're just going to be there for a second, but then you find out there are like a billion side quests and a random dragon living in the back of the map that wants to set you on fire. You spend so much time picking up literal rocks and flowers just so you can upgrade your potions or make a slightly better pair of cants for your character. It is a total trap because the map is so huge that you end up wandering around for hours just looking at the scenery or trying to figure out how to jump up a mountain that clearly was not meant to be climbed. The best part of the game is definitely the people you hang out with, because your team is full of total weirdos who cannot stop arguing with each other. You have a grumpy elf who hates magic even though she is an elf, and a guy named Iron Bull who is a giant gray mercenary who just wants to fight dragons and eat food. You spend half the game just talking to them back at your base because you want them to like you, and if you play your cards right, you can even start a romance with them. It adds so much time to the game because you feel bad if you do not check in on your friends after every single mission to see how they are doing. Then there are the dragons, which are the coolest and most annoying part of the whole experience. There are 10 high dragons hidden around the world, and fighting them is a massive ordeal that takes forever. You have to prep your whole team and bring all the right potions, and then you spend 20 minutes just hacking at a giant lizard's ankles while it screams and flies around. It's super satisfying when you finally win, but then you realize there are 9 more of them and you just have to do it all over again. By the time you actually get to the end of the story, you've spent so much time managing your castle and sending spies on missions that you've basically forgotten what the sun looks like. It's a huge epic adventure that makes you feel like a real leader, but it definitely demands that you give up your entire social life to get the job done. Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen is easily one of the weirdest and awesome games ever made, and it starts in the most insane way possible. You are just chilling in your fishing village when a massive red dragon shows up out of nowhere and literally rips your heart out of your chest and eats it. Instead of dying like a normal person, you just wake up as the Arisen, and now you have to go find that dragon to get your organs back. It is a crazy way to start a story, and it only gets weirder from there because you spend the next 100 hours wandering around a world that feels like it wants to step on you or swallow you whole. The thing that makes this game take up so much of your time is the combat, because it's not like any other RPG you have played. If you see a giant 3-headed snake or a massive griffin, you don't just stand there and poke its toes with a sword. You actually jump on its back and climb up its fur like you were playing a crazy version of a playground jungle gym. You can grab onto a cyclops and stab it right in its one giant eyeball, or hang onto a dragon's wing while it flies high up into the sky. It feels amazing, and you will spend hours just looking for big monsters to climb on because it never gets old to be a tiny human hanging onto the neck of a beast that is the size of a house. Then there's the pawn system, which is honestly kind of creepy, but also super cool. You get to create your own sidekick who follows you everywhere and never stops talking even when you really want them to be quiet. These pawns are basically weird clones from another dimension, and they learn stuff as you play. If your friend plays the game, their pawn might show up in your world and tell you where a secret treasure chest is because they already found it with their other master. You end up spending way too much time in the character creator just making your pawn look exactly like a famous person or your favorite anime character, just so they can follow you around and tell you that wolves hunt in packs for the millionth time. The Dark Arisen part of the game adds this massive dungeon called Bitter Black Isle, which is basically a death trap for players who think they're tough. It's dark and scary and full of things that can kill your whole team in one hit. You will spend dozens of hours just descending into the basement of this place and getting lost in the shadows while a giant version of death chases you around with a scythe. It is a total grind, but the loot you get is so good that you just can't stop yourself from going back in for more. It's a game that doesn't really tell you where to go or what to do, but the world is so fun to play in that you'll look at the clock and realize you just spent 6 hours fighting a single Hydra, and you're not even mad about it. Monster Hunter World is a massive time sink, and the reason people lose their minds over it isn't just because big lizard go boom. This game actually changed everything for the series. Before this, Monster Hunter was this clunky, niche thing on handhelds where you had to deal with loading screens every time you walked 10 feet. World blew the doors off and made the maps actually feel like living, breathing places where you aren't just a player, you're part of a food chain that hates you. The gameplay is all about the dance. You don't just mash buttons and win. If you try to play this like a regular hack and slash game, a Rathalos is gonna fireball you into the dirt before you even get a swing in. Every single one of the 14 weapons feels like learning a whole new sport. If you pick the greatsword, you are basically playing a game of chicken with a monster, waiting for the perfect moment to drop a massive overhead chop that takes like 5 seconds to charge up. If you miss, you look like a total idiot. If you hit, it feels like you just cracked the planet in half. Then you have the charge blade, which is so complicated it basically requires a college degree just to understand how to load your files and not have your sword bounce off the monster's skin. the real grind mechanics. The reason your clock hits 300 hours is the desire sensor. It is this unwritten rule where the game knows exactly what item you need to finish your armor set, and it refuses to give it to you. You will kill the same electric squirrel monster 20 times looking for one specific gem, and the game will just give you scales and bones instead. It makes you feel like you are losing your mind. But then you finally get that drop, and the dopamine hit is so strong, you immediately go look for the next thing to hunt. You spend hours in the workshop just staring at numbers and elemental resistances, because if you go into a fight against a fire monster wearing ice armor, you are going to get toasted in one hit. The why the world is actually different. The ecology is the part that usually hooks people who don't even like boss rushes. You can literally just sit in a bush and watch a great Jagras eat a whole herbivore and then go back to its nest to feed its babies. It is kind of gross, but also super detailed. The monsters have personalities. Some will ignore you until you poke them, and others, like Basil Goose, will hear you fighting something else and fly across the entire map just to drop exploding scales on your head like a B-52 bomber. That guy is the ultimate party pooper, and he has ruined more missions than I can count. Baldur's Gate 3 is the game that basically embarrassed every other RPG developer out there because it showed everyone that you can actually make a massive world where your choices aren't just fake buttons that lead to the same ending. It is based on Dungeons & Dragons, which usually sounds like something for nerds in a basement, but this game turned it into a high-budget drama where everyone is hot and everything is trying to kill you. The game spent years in early access, with fans basically bug testing it for the developers, and by the time it finally came out in 2023, it was so polished and dense that it felt like a miracle. You start the game on a gross, fleshy spaceship with a literal brain-eating parasite inside your eye socket, and from that moment on, you are on a clock to find a cure before you turn into a purple monster with tentacles. The gameplay is turn-based, but don't let that fool you into thinking it is slow or boring. It's more like a sandbox where you can use the environment to be a total genius or a complete moron. If there's a boss standing on a bridge, you don't have to fight him for 20 minutes. You can just use a spell to shove him off the edge and watch him disappear into the abyss. You can stack 20 explosive barrels around an enemy while they're talking to you, and then light a match to end the fight before it even starts. The game actually rewards you for thinking outside the box, which is rare because most games would just give you an invisible wall or tell you that you aren't allowed to do that. You spend hundreds of hours just experimenting with weird stuff, like talking to every single dead body you find, or using a potion to turn into a tiny cat so you can sneak through a hole in a wall. The reason people get obsessed and play this for 200 hours is the characters. Your party is full of people who are all deeply broken and kinda jerks at first. You have a vampire spawn who is obsessed with power, a wizard with a literal nuke in his chest, and a green alien lady who thinks she is better than everyone. You spend so much time at your camp just talking to them and trying to keep them from killing each other. The voice acting and the facial animations are so good that it feels like you're watching a movie where you get to decide who lives and who dies. You can be a total saint who saves every tiefling in sight, or you can be a complete villain who betrays everyone who trusted you. The game doesn't judge you, it just lets the world react to your nonsense. The sheer amount of detail is what makes it a 100-hour commitment. There are quests in Act 1 that don't pay off until Act 3, which might be 80 hours later. If you kill a random guy in a basement at the start of the game, you might find out later that he was the only person who could have helped you solve a murder mystery in the city. It makes every click feel heavy, because you know the game is actually paying attention to what you do. You will find yourself reloading saves constantly just to see, what if I said this instead? And before you know it, it's 4 in the morning and you're still arguing with a devil about a contract for your soul. It's a massive, complicated, beautiful mess of a game that actually respects the player's intelligence.
Bow before me. Bow before the absolute.
Xenoblade Chronicles is a game that is so big it feels like it shouldn't even be running on a Nintendo console. The whole world is freaking built on the bodies of 2 massive frozen gods who killed each other in the middle of a blank ocean millions of years ago. You play as a kid named Shulk who lives on the foot of one of these gods, and his whole village gets wrecked by these evil killer robots called Mechon. Most games would just give you a regular sword, but Shulk finds this glowing red laser blade called the Monado that lets him see the future. This isn't just a story thing either. The actual gameplay lets you see an enemy's attack before it happens so you can try to stop it, which is pretty much the only reason you don't die every 5 minutes. The reason this game takes over 100 hours to finish is that the scale of the world is just stupidly huge. When you are walking across the leg of a god, you can look up and see the other god's arm hanging over you in the sky. And it isn't just a background picture. You can actually walk all the way there. It is a massive trek, and the game is packed with hundreds of side quests from random villagers who want you to kill 5 monsters or find a lost earring. Honestly, most of the side quests are kind of a chore, but you end up doing them anyway because the world is so pretty to look at. You'll be wandering through a glowing swamp at night or a forest with floating islands, and you just get lost in the vibes for hours without even touching the main story. The combat is this weird mix of an MMO and an action game, where your characters attack automatically, but you have to pick special moves called arts and manage where you are standing. If you stand behind a monster, you do more damage, but if the monster turns around, you're in trouble. It gets really intense because you are constantly managing aggro, which is basically making sure the big scary monster is hitting your tanky friend Ren instead of your squishy healer. The game also has a chain attack mechanic where the whole screen turns blue and you get to unload your best moves all at once, which feels amazing when you finally pull it off against a boss that's 10 levels higher than you. What's unique about Xenoblade is how it handles the vision mechanic. During a fight, if a boss is about to use a move that will kill one of your friends, the game stops and shows you a vision of them dying. You then have like 10 seconds to run over there, warn them, or cast a shield to change the future. It's a real rush and keeps you from just falling asleep while your characters auto-attack. Plus, the music is incredible. It's the kind of soundtrack that makes you feel like you're on the most epic adventure of all time, even when you're just looking for a specific type of cabbage in a field. It's a long, emotional journey with a lot of plot twists that will make your brain hurt, and by the time you reach the end, you'll feel like you've actually traveled across the bodies of gods.
The future I see, it isn't set. So I can use this power to change the future, and that's exactly what I intend to do.
If you thought Baldur's Gate 3 was a lot to handle, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous is here to basically shove you into a locker and take your lunch money. This game is based on the Pathfinder tabletop rules, which are notorious for being so complicated they make doing your taxes look like child's play. It's developed by Owlcat Games, and they clearly didn't believe in the concept of less is more. They went for more is more, and then add 1,000 more pages of math on top of that. You aren't just a hero here, you are the leader of a literal crusade against an infinite army of demons that have ripped a hole in the sky called the World Wound. The reason this game easily hits 150 hours is the sheer mountain of choices you have to make before you even start playing. There are over 25 classes, and each of those has like 6 subclasses, and then you can multi-class into something else. You could spend 5 hours just in the character creator trying to figure out if you want to be a warrior who rides a dinosaur or a wizard who specializes in turning people into dogs. If you don't know what you're doing, you will build a character that is total garbage and get absolutely demolished by a random droman in the first act. It's a game that expects you to actually read the fine print on every spell and feat, or you're going to have a bad time. The Mythic Path system. This is the one thing that makes Pathfinder stand out from every other RPG ever made. About midway through, the game stops being a normal adventure and lets you choose a mythic path. You basically get to decide what kind of god-tier being you want to become. The Angel. You grow wings and start nuking demons with holy light. The Lich. You literally die, turn into a skeleton, and raise your own undead army to fight for you. The Trickster. You break the fourth wall and mess with the game's actual dice rolls because you think life is a joke. The Swarm that walks. You become a literal cloud of bugs that eats everyone and everything in its path. Each path completely changes the story, the dialogue, and how people treat you. It's like having 10 different games in one, which is why people keep coming back to play it over and over. You might spend 80 hours as a holy crusader and then decide you want to see what happens if you just turn everyone into zombies instead. On top of the regular RPG stuff, the game forces you to play a mini strategy game where you manage armies on a big map. You have to recruit soldiers, build hospitals, and move your little army icons around to fight demon hordes. Some people hate this part because it's a lot of micromanagement, but it really sells the idea that you are the boss of a giant war. You aren't just some guy in a tavern, you're sitting in a war room deciding which generals to hire and whether or not to trust a suspicious succubus who says she wants to be a good person. It's a massive, exhausting, and incredibly rewarding grind. The game is famous for having some of the most unfair difficulty spikes in history, where a boss will suddenly have such high armor that you literally cannot hit them unless you buff your team for 10 minutes straight. But when your build finally clicks and you start deleting demon lords in a single turn, you feel like an actual genius. It's a game for people who want to live in a world, not just visit it, and it will suck the soul out of you in the best way possible. Look, if you told me 10 years ago that one of the best RPGs in the world would be about a middle-aged guy with a permanent perm fighting people with a giant fish in the middle of Honolulu, I would have told you to stop sniffing the glue. But here we are. Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth is the sequel to the big soft reboot of the Yakuza series, and it is absolutely massive. It takes Ichiban Kasuga, who is basically a human golden retriever in a suit, out of Japan and dumps him in Hawaii to find his long-lost mom. The reason this game is a 100-hour black hole is because it is packed with so much stuff that it honestly feels like a fever dream. You aren't just doing turn-based combat, you are playing a game that is constantly trying to distract you with the weirdest side content ever made. One minute you are in a serious, tear-jerking scene about family and betrayal, and the next minute you are playing a parody of Pokemon called Sujimon, where you catch weird creeps and hobos in the street to make them fight for you. I'm not kidding. You actually train them and go to gyms to become the Sujimon master. It's so disrespectful to your time, but you just can't stop doing it. And now, the gameplay flip. The series used to be a brawler where you just mashed buttons to punch guys, but now it's a full-blown turn-based RPG because the main character, Ichiban, is obsessed with Dragon Quest. He imagines the fights as RPG battles in his head, which is why a random thug suddenly turns into a giant trash monster or a guy breathing fire. In Infinite Wealth, they actually fixed the movement so you can walk around during your turn to pick up a bicycle or a traffic cone and smash it over someone's head for extra damage. It feels way more active than your typical stand there and wait combat, and the animations are so over the top that you won't get bored even after 5,000 fights. Dondoko Island, the Life Destroyer. If the main story isn't enough, the game basically shoves an entire version of Animal Crossing inside itself called Dondoko Island. You find a literal garbage dump island and decide to turn it into a 5-star resort. You spend dozens of hours cleaning up trash, crafting furniture, catching bugs, and inviting guests to stay at your huts. You can lose 40 hours here and completely forget that you're supposed to be finding your mother or stopping a massive criminal conspiracy. It's a game within a game, and it's actually polished enough to be its own separate release. Why it's unique. What's actually special about this game is that it's an RPG about adults. You aren't playing as a bunch of teenagers saving the world from a dark lord. You're playing as guys in their 40s and 50s who are worried about their jobs, their health, and their past mistakes. Seeing Kiryu, the legendary protagonist of the old games, deal with his own mortality while Ichiban tries to keep everyone's spirits up is surprisingly emotional. It's got that classic Yakuza mix of being incredibly stupid and funny one second, and then making you want to cry the next. Between the Segway riding, the crazy karaoke songs, and the massive dungeons, you will look at the clock and realize you've been in Hawaii for a week and you still haven't finished the 3rd chapter. It's a trip, and probably the most human RPG on this entire list. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is the kind of game that feels like Square Enix just decided to throw every single idea they've had for the last 30 years into one box and see if it exploded. It's the second part of the remake Trilogy, taking Cloud and his band of eco-terrorists out of the dark metallic city of Midgar and dumping them into a world that is so big it actually feels disrespectful to your free time. You remember how the original 1997 game had that world map where you looked like a giant walking over tiny trees? Yeah, that's gone. Now, every single inch of that map is a fully realized massive zone packed with stuff to do, and it will easily take you 100 to 150 hours if you even have a hint of completionist energy in your soul. The gameplay is this crazy hybrid of real-time action and menu-based strategy that actually works perfectly. You're swinging a sword that's bigger than your body, but you still have to slow down time to pick spells and abilities once your bar fills up. The big new addition here is synergy skills, where two characters team up up for a move, like Cloud launching Tifa into the air or Barret using Aerith as a literal human turret. It makes you feel like the party actually likes each other instead of just being random people standing in a line waiting for their turn to hit a monster. But the real reason this game takes forever isn't just the fighting, it's the fact that the game refuses to let you walk 10 feet without giving you a minigame. The minigame apocalypse. I'm not exaggerating when I say there is a minigame for everything. Want to play cards? There's Queen's Blood, which is a surprisingly deep deck builder that will eat 20 hours of your life because you just have to beat every random NPC in every village. Want to ride a Chocobon? There's a whole racing league. Want to flex? There's a gym workout game. There's even a piano playing simulator that is harder than actually learning to play the piano in real life. It's wild because usually this stuff feels like filler, but in Rebirth, it's actually high quality. You'll be in the middle of a life or death chase after the legendary villain Sephiroth, and then you'll spend 3 hours trying to get a high score on a dolphin riding course. It's total madness, but it's so charming you just go along with it. Why the world matters. The unique history of this game is that it's not just a remake, it's more like a sequel that is self-aware. If you played the original, you know what's supposed to happen, but the game keeps winking at you and suggesting that maybe things won't go the same way this time. This creates this constant tension where you're exploring these beautiful areas, like the tropical beaches of Costa del Sol or the neon lights of the Gold Saucer, while wondering if the world is about to break. The level of detail is insane. You can see the wear and tear on Cloud's leather armor and the individual blades of grass in the fields. It's a technical beast that makes the PS5 sweat. The character work is what really keeps you hooked for the long haul though. The game takes the time to let you go on dates or hang out with each party member to build your relationship. You get to see sides of characters like Red 13 or Yuffie that the original game just didn't have the space to show. By the time you reach the final chapters, you've spent so much time with these people that the emotional hits actually land. It's a massive, colorful, slightly bloated but totally incredible journey that proves you can take a classic and make it feel brand new without losing the heart of what made it special in the first place. Just be prepared to play a lot of cards.
All I want is one thing: to keep the others safe.
It's upon us. The reunion. When worlds merge.
Mass Effect Trilogy. Look, the Mass Effect Trilogy is basically the ultimate sci-fi soap opera, and if you haven't played it, you're missing out on the best way to lose 100 hours of your life. It is not just one game, it is this massive 3-part epic where you play as Commander Shepard, the only person in the galaxy who realizes that giant sentient space squids called Reapers are coming to turn everyone into organic smoothies. The crazy thing about the history of this series is how it actually changed the way we think about choices in games. Back when these first started coming out, the idea that a decision you made in the first 10 hours of the first game could come back to haunt you 50 hours later in the third game was totally unheard of. It creates this insane web of consequences where if you let a teammate die because you were being a jerk or you just weren't prepared, they stay dead. They don't show up in the sequels, their story just ends, and you have to live with that guilt while you stare at their empty locker on your ship. The gameplay is kind of a weird journey itself because the first game feels like a clunky old school RPG where you're constantly overheating your guns and driving a space tank called the Mako that handles like a bouncy castle on wheels. But then the second and third games turn into these slick, high-speed shooters where you're using biotics, which is basically space magic to throw enemies across the room like ragdolls. But honestly, the shooting is just what you do between the actual important stuff, which is talking to your crew. You spend so much time on your ship, the Normandy, just walking around and checking in on everyone because the characters are so well written that they start feeling like actual friends. You've got Garrus, who is this cool birdman sniper that always has your back, and Rex, a giant grumpy lizard who just wants to headbutt everything in sight.
Speak when spoken to, Uvenk.
What really makes this a 100-hour marathon is the loyalty system. In the second game, you have to go on these deep, personal missions for every single person on your team to help them deal with their family drama or their past mistakes. If you don't do them, or if you mess them up, they won't trust you, and when you get to the final suicide mission, they will straight up die. It is the most stressful thing ever because you're sitting there sweating, hoping you made the right call so your favorite alien bestie doesn't get blasted by a laser. You can play as a total saint or a complete renegade who punches reporters and hangs up on the Galactic Council because they're being annoying, but either way, the game tracks every single thing you do. By the time you get to the end of the third game, you feel the weight of every person you've saved and every person you've failed, and that is why people are still obsessed with this trilogy today. It is a massive, emotional, and sometimes messy space epic that makes you feel like the biggest hero in the universe while also reminding you that you can't save everyone.